Anyway, my sister told me this. And she swears that it's true. And I hope it's true. And if I tell it right, you will hope it's true. My sister is a retired school teacher. And she supplies herself to people who don't have teachers. She's a supply teacher. When somebody is sick or dead, she'll supply herself. And a lot of her friends do this as well. And her friend told her this story. And when she told me the story, I thought I would pee myself. I was in New York where I live, and she phoned me, and I fell on my phone's next to my bed. I fell onto my bed. You know that way you laugh, your legs won't work right. And I told my wife, I said, Flo just told me the funniest story. I'm going to tell my audience this. It's about a dwarf. And she said, well, you can't, Billy. You can't do that. I said, why? She says, because you can't say dwarf. I said, why the fuck not? I'm talking about a dwarf. Well, surely you can say dwarf when it's a dwarf you're talking about. She says, they're little people. I said, but little people and dwarfs. There's a difference between a little person and a dwarf. One of them's a fucking dwarf. And they both know which one it fucking is. Don't give me that shite. So I decided to tell it. Her friend was going to supply herself to a school somewhere. And she got on a Glasgow bus. Oh, please be true. And she sat down, and it just happened to be the last seat. And the bus took off and trundled off into the day. 4 or 5 stops later, the bus stops, and a wee dwarf woman comes on. I've now compounded the felony by calling her a wee dwarf. She wasn't a particularly small dwarf. She was just a dwarf-sized dwarf. I'll probably get all sorts of complaints now. Dear Mr. Connolly, I saw your otherwise excellent show. What a pity you descended to the dwarf story. I, personally, am a member of the Tall Dwarf Society. I'm 6'4". I'm proud to call myself a dwarf. I also do impersonations of chocolate biscuits, if you're ever stuck. Anyway, the wee woman got on the bus, the wee dwarf woman, and discovered there's no seat, and so hung on to whatever was nearest, the seat to the pole or whatever, and the bus took off. There was a wee schoolgirl in a school uniform sitting over here, probably urged along by her mother. Give the woman your seat. Give that woman your seat. She went over to the wee dwarf woman and she said, excuse me, would you like to have my seat? Whereupon the wee dwarf woman flew into a rage and said, oh, aye, because I'm a dwarf. You're offering me a seat simply because I'm a dwarf. Well, I have managed my whole life as a dwarf. It's not a problem to me. Keep your seat. The girl, cringing with embarrassment, went back to her seat, and the bus trundled on in silent embarrassment for a stop or 3. Then, oh, please be true, a big Glasgow woman was getting off the bus. And before she went up to the door, she went over to the wee dwarf woman. She said, I'm getting off the bus, and I'm leaving my empty seat here. Because I'm a dwarf, you say, no, not because you're a dwarf, because you're another human being. I happen to be leaving the bus. My seat is vacant. I'm merely pointing it out to you that it exists. As a matter of fact, I thought you were extremely rude to that wee girl, and you owe her an apology. As a matter of fact, I hope when you go home tonight, Snow White kicks your ass.